to be sort of a book review, but if you watched my video back in October, Darren actually went online and picked out 7 books for me to read, and I opened them on camera with you. I'll link that video down below if you want to see it. He basically went on my Goodreads and also picked out a few that I hadn't put on my to be read pile, and it was an interesting way to find some new books that I possibly wouldn't have picked out myself. So like I said, I'll link that video down below if you want to go and see that first. It's probably a good idea. So I've now read all 7 books. Obviously the ones I read sort of further back, I'm going to have sort of less to talk about. I did take notes at the time, so I can talk to you a bit more about what I thought at the time, but my memory's really bad with books, so I'll just warn you now. But let's get into it. Also, I'm still having the remnants of a cold that's been lasting for like 2 weeks, so I apologise if I'm a bit sniffly and stuff like that, but it is the winter time. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book I read was The Easy Way Out by Stephen Amsterdam. This was probably one of the books that I was most excited to read. It was about a nurse that helped with euthanasia, and that sort of quite interested me. Like I said, it was one of the first books I read. It's quite a small, thin book. It's only about 250 pages, so it was really quite quick to fly through. Although I was most excited for this book, it probably was one of the ones that left me the most disappointed. I only gave it 3 stars. It left me with a lot of unanswered questions. I felt they could have maybe explained a bit more and not made certain events so jumpy and rushed, and just made the book a bit bigger. What else did I put? Obviously this book is very much depends on your view of euthanasia and assisted suicide. For me, I'm definitely pro it for certain cases. Also, one thing, I couldn't figure out where this was set. Obviously they are doing euthanasia, so you would think it's like Switzerland, one of the countries that sort of allows it. It's very much, he's a nurse, that he doesn't, it's still the person taking the drink, it's still their decision. He doesn't really play too much of a part. He has to make it their decision, so he's not held accountable for it. He just assists them to provide the means to do so, really. There was a couple other events in it that just made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Things like he had like a threesome and a one-night stand. Just not something I'd particularly partake in, so it just made me feel a bit uncomfortable. What else? Just little things like he called his mum by her first name, and I know a lot of people do that, but I just find that a bit, like, if it is your biological mother, why are you calling them by their first name? It's always just, it's not something I do, so that was another sort of point, I guess you could say, against it. But yeah, it just felt very sort of sudden, and like the events were quite jumpy. Obviously it was interesting to see sort of family's point of view, who had the family member going through the procedure, and so that was interesting. But yeah, overall it sort of left me quite underwhelmed, and I was wanting more for this book. I've only kept it so I can show you, but it will be going in a charity pile now, so yeah, slightly disappointing on that one. So the next book I read was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I think I've read a couple books by this author. Basically this is about a mother whose daughter Ellie goes missing one day when she's a teenager, and it sort of follows on, mostly telling from Ellie's point of view, how she's dealing with that. She ends up meeting this gentleman in a cafe, and they sort of spark up a relationship together, and what's weird is that his daughter is pretty much the spitting image of Ellie at her age. Obviously because of the age gap we know she's not Ellie, but it's just a weird coincidence. So this is more of like a thriller mystery. I gave this one 4 stars. I did feel like I was maybe one step ahead the whole time, which is not what you want from a thriller or a mystery book. You never want to be knowing what's going to happen. You don't ever want to be one step ahead. You want to be blindsided by the twist. Yes, the twist was very good, I'd say, but I did sort of allude to it. I was partly guessing the correct answer to it. You do get quite a few perspectives in this book, not only, you know, from the mum, but you also you get the point of view of Ellie's capturer, which I thought was quite interesting, because you see in her mind her point of view and how she sort of twists it and how she justifies her actions, and so that I thought was good. I definitely would say it is a good mystery thriller. I did give it 4 stars, but just for the fact that I was maybe always one step ahead is why I didn't give it 5 stars. So yes, I did enjoy that one. The next one is Boundless by Kenneth Opel. I did mention this. I think did I do its own book review? I definitely mentioned it in a favourites. I gave this book 5 stars. I was very pleasantly surprised by this one. If I can find that review, I will link it down below as well. This is a middle grade book, which I didn't know going into it, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's, I believe, I got the impression it was sort of set in like the 1920s and very opulent sort of trains coming about. They try and build a railway to cross America, and the boy in it, Will, his father is one of the main sort of engineers and builders of this railway, and they end up going on this like maiden voyage across America. There's like baddies out to get him. There's this key to one of the carriages that these baddies are after, and only Will and his dad have the keys to that carriage. So it's very sort of, it was very fast paced sort of adventure. I love books that are set on trains, especially back in like the 20s, 30s, even like 40s, 50s, like when it was super luxurious to travel by train. Now it's sort of very common, everyone can really do it. So I enjoy that sort of setting. Yeah, I gave that 5 stars. The next book I read was The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This was a book that I knew I probably would enjoy going into it. It's a weird thing to say I enjoy, but I do enjoy reading books about the Holocaust and World War II, and this, pretty much like it says, is about a gentleman that goes into Auschwitz and he becomes one of the main tattooers that tattoos all the numbers on the prisoners' arms, and I found it very interesting because it's a very individual, like everyone's experience of war and the Holocaust is very different. You will never read 2 accounts that are the same, but this is a very specific role he had, and obviously it was a big part of the concentration camps was people getting their numbers printed on them, and it was interesting to see not only that side of it and how that process went about and how he felt, but also he was extremely lucky, like throughout. Just, he had a way about him, like the gift of the gab. He was able to make friends with like the SS and people on the outside, and was able to really help him and others to live. He also sparked up a relationship with another girl in the camp, which I thought was quite interesting. You don't see too much romance go on because it's such an awful place, and it's like even then you can still find like beauty in people, and you can find those friendships, and so that was really interesting as well. I give this book 5 stars. I do think it's definitely a good one. It's definitely been very well publicised and very sort of hyped in the book world. Like I said, so he originally was from Slovakia, and basically the government at the time told Jewish families they had to give up a child, to give up a son or daughter 18 or above to work for the government. And originally his brother was going to go, but his brother had, you know, a family, and he was like, no, I will go. So he went and obviously was taken into a concentration camp. And again, there was that kindness that he met from locals that were working on the camp. They weren't prisoners, but they had been contracted in, and there was still sort of friendship and kindness between them. Not everyone had the same thoughts that the SS did and these Nazis, and it showed that side of it. And like I said, he was just very cunning, and he was extremely determined, and he never sort of let something get to him. He always battled through it, and I think that is detrimental to his survival of the Holocaust. So that was that book, and that is by Heather Morris, if I didn't say so. Again, another book I enjoyed reading. So the next 3 books I all read this month. I've really been reading quite a lot this month. So this book was one that I didn't really know a lot going in. I believe this was one of the ones that Darren picked out on his own. It's How to Be Happy by Eva Woods. It doesn't give away too much on the back. It's basically mainly told by the perspective of Annie, and her mother has early onset dementia and is in hospital at the start of this book, and she ends up meeting this girl called Polly in hospital, and Polly sort of latches on to her. They become acquaintances, and throughout the book they begin to grow a friendship. What it doesn't tell you on the back, but you learn pretty early on, is that Polly has a brain tumour, and she's pretty much been told she only has months to live, and Polly is sort of very matter of fact as to enjoying her life while she's still got it, and just living it to the fullest, doing whatever she can, you know, ticking off those things on a bucket list and trying to make an impact with the days she has left. And she creates these sort of 100 days of happiness, and she obviously ropes Annie into this and helps, you know, transform her life as well. Makes her see sort of a different side of things. I give this book 4 stars. I did quite enjoy it, and I did read it pretty quickly. I'm not sure if it was on a shelf I would have picked it up necessarily myself, but you do get sort of all the emotions in this book, and there's a lot of different things intertwined in it, and it covers a lot of areas from like sort of family to work to relationships. It sort of covers all bases, and basically it leaves you with the lasting like to take away from it, just to enjoy every day as if it's your last, really, and just to live in the moment. Don't worry about the small things, and really to be happy every day, not worry about, you know, the trivial things, and if you're not happy in something, change it. So that's sort of what I took away from this book. So yes. The next book is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. This is written by the Girl on the Train author, Paula Hawkins, and it's apparently the thriller of the year. So let me try and find my notes on this. So I only gave this book 3 stars, which is probably like 2 stars at least less than what I gave Girl on the Train. Obviously I think a lot of people had such great experiences with Girl on the Train that it really hyped up this book. This is a completely like different book, obviously, but it wasn't as great as I would have liked. So again, this book did leave me a little underwhelming. It is centered around this character called Nell, who is obsessed with this local like pool lake area. I wasn't quite sure how big an area this was. I didn't feel it wasn't described particularly well for me, so I'm still a little unsure how large this pool of water was. But basically there's the stories that a lot of people had committed suicide and drowned in this lake, and Nell is obsessed with it, and the stories that surround it. She's always been fascinated by the water and swimming in it, and one day she is found in the lake dead. Is it a suicide? Has she been pushed? That is sort of the questions that we're going about. This is told from a lot of different points of views. In fact, at the start it even has like a little glossary of all the people, which at the start is extremely necessary because you're just flitting from one person to another. As you get on, you refer less to that at the front, you sort of remember who the characters are. But just to let you know, I mean, there is at least 3, 6, 9, there's at least 12 different people that you get perspectives from, plus other little stories. So there was a lot of characters, and I feel maybe that wasn't as necessary. Some of it I didn't feel contributed a lot to the plot lines, but obviously the author felt they were necessary to include. At the end, it left me on such a cliffhanger that annoyed me. Like, literally the last page, I was like, you thought you had it all together, and then you thought everything was wrapped up, and then the last sentence leaves you on a cliffhanger and you're like, what the hell? So I have no idea. I think half the people on Goodreads have no idea what's happened, and I didn't feel that any of the characters were particularly likeable. I didn't warm to any of them. I felt relationships were very estranged, and yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy this book. I did read it fairly quickly though, and if you are looking for a thriller, you may like it. If you did read Paula Hawkins' Girl on the Train, you may enjoy it as well, but for me, and I think a lot of people, it just wasn't what we expected from this book, so yes. And then the last book I read last night, and it's probably the most surprising, I'd say, out of these that I enjoyed, and this is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine. This has been hyped everywhere. It's a Sunday Times bestseller. It was a Costa Book Awards winner. This is written by Gail Honeyman. I'd seen it everywhere. It wasn't something I was going to pick up, and I was quite surprised when Darren had included this. I think because obviously it was quite popular, I thought I might like it. Definitely would not have picked this up if it was on a shelf. I mean, I hadn't up until then. It wasn't on my to be read list. It just didn't seem like something that would interest me, and pretty much right up until the end I was still like, did I enjoy that book? Did I not? I think I enjoyed it, is my answer to that. I did give it 4 stars, probably more to like 3.5 to 4 stars. But yeah, I finished this last night and had to like quickly get all my thoughts out, so there's quite a few on here. But yes, I was pleasantly surprised. To start with, it is about this girl called Eleanor who seems very normal, plain, you could say, very stuck in her routine. She works in an office job. She has that typical sort of boring-ish life that we seem to get in storylines like that. She is very isolated. She doesn't have any friends, or the only family she has is her mummy, and she only speaks to her once a week. She goes to work, she comes home, she doesn't really do anything social, very sort of stuck in her routine. And to start with, that was a little boring for me. I didn't quite understand the character. She was very blunt and very socially awkward, and I didn't warm to her as a character. I thought she was even slightly rude at times, and as the book went on, I slowly liked her character more and more, and I think that's partly down to her relationship with Raymond. Raymond is he works in her office building. He works in the IT department, and they start to gather up an acquaintance. They are walking back home from work one day and see this gentleman fall over in the street, this elderly man. They help him get to hospital. They sort of strike up a friendship through seeing this elderly man, and they get a friendship with this man in hospital, and that's sort of where it starts. And Raymond really sort of brings Eleanor out of her shell a little bit, gets her to really push boundaries, and especially socially, and I think that helped to bring out her character. One thing I found really unnecessarily, well, it wasn't unnecessarily, but I really did not enjoy the plotline, was her obsessing over this musician guy. That was a plotline throughout. I thought, like, at the end it was fine because it all sort of wrapped up and it was like a neat little bundle, but as I was reading it throughout, I was like, what is she doing? Like, that's totally nuts. She's acting like a teenage girl, and I didn't like that. So probably I didn't enjoy the first like 2/3 of the book, and then the last like third I was like, actually something has turned here and I like this. It was really quite a weird process for me to go through. I still don't know my full thoughts on it really. So yeah, like I said, I did sort of warm to her more as the book went on. Throughout we have been alluded to the fact she had a very troublesome childhood, and that's probably how she's very sort of socially inward. She's not really had much of a childhood. She was put in foster care and in care homes, and she's not really been able to live her life to the fullest really. And she's been really pushed from pillar to post, and like I said, she only has contact with her mum. We know her mum has done something quite bad. We are not, like, we sort of allude to the fact that maybe she's in prison to start with. We think, like, I thought she was maybe like in like a mental institute, like something like that, but I think it sort of alludes to the fact that maybe she was in prison. If you've read the book, at the end, Mummy is a great character, and it really shows how much of her childhood had an impact on Eleanor's life. And I did think her mummy character was bloody awful throughout. The way she talked to her, I was like, that is disgusting. How is she still, like, it's that thing of she's the only person she had and she held on to that relationship even though it was a very damaging one. So yes, and the last thing I think I probably want to say about this book is I like the fact that her and Raymond stayed friends for pretty much most of the book. I mean, towards the end you could sort of see there was like a spark that might happen in the future, but throughout they were friends. Like, he was just there as a good character and a support for her, and I liked that. I liked how they didn't try and force a romance into it. So yes, I think that's all I've got to say. Like I said, gave it 4 stars, pleasantly surprised. And that's all the books that Darren bought me. So I do have quite a few other books that I need to get through, so probably once I finish those books, maybe I will get Darren to do this again. He did buy me a few books for Christmas that I'd asked for, so they will be coming up at some point. So those were all of the books that I had to review today. Quite a few. Hopefully there's something here that you take away and you might like to read, because there's quite a variety here. And yeah, I really enjoyed doing this. If you'd like to see it again in the future, let me know. And yes, if you've read any of these books as well, let me know what you thought. And I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.